In February 1944, the USS Grayback submarine vanished beneath the waves of the East China Sea with 80 souls aboard. The official story was straightforward. On February 27th, a Japanese bomber scored a direct hit and the boat went down instantly. The Navy listed her as lost with all hands. The coordinates were meticulously documented in captured enemy war records. Case closed. But 75 years later, when a private underwater archaeology team finally located the wreck, they found it more than 100 miles from where it was supposed to be. A translation error, the Navy said, a simple mistake in transcribing Japanese documents. Then divers entered the captain's quarters and found a sealed watertight container that had waited 3/4 of a century to be opened. Inside were encrypted radio transmissions, forged death certificates, and a handwritten log with a final entry dated 5 days after the submarine supposedly sank. And what that evidence revealed would expose a betrayal that reached the highest levels of American naval intelligence. A secret so dangerous that someone had spent 75 years making sure the Grayback stayed lost. November 18, 2024. National Archives, Washington, D.C. Commander Sarah Chen sat in her windowless office surrounded by 70 years of classified naval records. Filing cabinets lined 3 walls. Her desk was covered with patrol reports, casualty lists, and technical assessments written by men who'd fought a war before she was born. She was good at this work, methodical, thorough. Her superiors valued her ability to piece together incomplete records and find patterns in chaos. The job suited her temperament, patience and precision rewarded, emotion set aside. On this particular morning, her encrypted email pinged with a message marked Priority, Classified, another submarine wreck, another assignment. Sarah opened the file. A private deep-sea exploration organization had located a World War II submarine off the coast of Japan. The Navy needed her to review the discovery report and cross-reference it with historical records. She'd done this work a dozen times before. The submarine was the USS Grayback. Sarah paused. The name was familiar. She pulled up the lost records from February 1944. 80 crew members, sunk by enemy action in the East China Sea. Official coordinates provided. Routine combat loss. She requested the full case file. The underwater archaeology team had discovered the wreck in 2019, but the Navy had only now authorized a detailed investigation. A remotely operated vehicle had explored the interior in October 2024 and found something unexpected. A sealed watertight container in the captain's quarters, still intact after 80 years. The container had been brought to the surface and shipped to the Naval Research Laboratory. Inside were encrypted radio messages, a handwritten logbook, several death certificates, and classified patrol orders that didn't match official records. The documents suggested the Grayback wasn't on a combat patrol when it sank. It was on a secret intelligence mission. Sarah's phone buzzed. Commander Briggs, her superior officer. "Chen, you see the Grayback file?" "Reading it now, sir." "Get me an analysis by Friday. Something's off about the coordinates. The wreck was found over 100 miles from where the Japanese record said it went down." "Translation error?" "That's what they're saying. But I want you to verify. Check the original Japanese documents if you can find them." Sarah made notes. "The sealed container, has anyone analyzed the contents?" "That's your job. Everything's being sent over this afternoon. Encrypted messages, the works. Figure out what that submarine was really doing." After he hung up, Sarah returned to the crew manifest. 80 names. 80 sailors who'd disappeared beneath the Pacific and hadn't been found for 75 years. She scanned the list alphabetically, then stopped. Chen, Thomas, Lieutenant Commander, age 34, cryptographer. The room tilted. She read it again. Thomas Chen, her great-grandfather. Sarah sat back in her chair, heart pounding. She'd been working on this file for 20 minutes and somehow missed the obvious. Her own blood was aboard that submarine. Thomas Chen, the family hero, the brilliant codebreaker who died fighting the Japanese, her grandmother's father who disappeared when her grandmother was only 6 years old. Sarah had grown up on stories about him, how he'd sacrificed everything for his country, how he'd died in the service of freedom, how the family should be proud. She remembered standing at the memorial wall at Pearl Harbor when she was 10 years old, touching her great-grandfather's engraved name with her small hand. Her grandmother had wept silently beside her, and now his submarine had been found, with a sealed container full of evidence suggesting something about his death was a lie. Her professional assignment had just become deeply, inescapably personal. November 18, 2024, evening. Sarah worked through the night. The encrypted messages arrived by secure courier at 6 p.m. She spread them across her desk and began the painstaking work of comparison with historical codebooks. The first message was dated February 29, 1944. Sarah checked the official records. The Grayback had sunk on February 27th. She pulled up the Japanese attack reports. Confirmed. February 27, 1944. The submarine had gone down instantly according to captured enemy documents. But this encrypted message was dated 2 days later. Impossible, unless the official date was wrong. Sarah examined the handwriting on the logbook. She recognized it immediately. Her great-grandfather's distinctive penmanship, the same careful script she'd seen in family letters her grandmother kept in a cedar box. The final entry was dated March 2, 1944, 5 days after the submarine supposedly sank. Her great-grandfather's last words, "They found us. The coordinates were leaked. This is not an accident." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. She pulled the translated Japanese attack reports and studied the coordinates. The Grayback had been located at 25 degrees, 47 minutes north, 128 degrees, 45 minutes east. But the official translation showed the attack occurring at 24 degrees, 40 minutes north, 128 degrees, 45 minutes east, more than 100 miles south. Sarah ran the numbers again. The latitude had been altered by exactly 1 degree, not a random error, a systematic change. Someone had moved the Grayback on paper. She pulled the post-war translation records. All captured Japanese documents related to submarine losses had been processed by a small team of naval intelligence officers between 1945 and 1946. The officer who signed off on the Grayback translation was Captain Vincent Hartley. Sarah ran Hartley's name through the personnel database. Retired Admiral Vincent Hartley. Age 96. Living in McLean, Virginia. A decorated Cold War hero, author of 3 books on naval strategy, consultant to the Pentagon. And according to her great-grandfather's final log entry, someone had leaked the Grayback's coordinates to the enemy. The official story was a lie. November 19, 2024, Commander Briggs's office. Sarah had prepared a preliminary report. She'd worked all night, cross-referencing documents, checking her findings 3 times. She was certain. Commander Briggs read her report in silence. His expression darkened with each page. Finally, he closed the file and looked at her with what seemed like genuine concern. "Commander Chen," he said carefully, "I appreciate your thoroughness, but I think you're reading too much into some archival inconsistencies. Sir, the coordinates were deliberately falsified. The date of sinking doesn't match the evidence from the wreck. And my great-grandfather's log says, 'Your great-grandfather.'" Briggs leaned back. "I didn't realize you had a personal connection to this case. I didn't either until I saw the crew manifest. But that doesn't change the evidence." Briggs tapped the report. Translation errors were common in 1945. The stress of wartime record-keeping led to all sorts of mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. The change is too precise. Someone altered the latitude by exactly 1 degree. or a tired translator misread Japanese characters. Briggs's tone shifted, became colder. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Do what, sir?" "Suggest that a decorated admiral committed treason. Tarnish your great-grandfather's memory by implying he was involved in some kind of conspiracy." Sarah felt her anger rising. "I'm not tarnishing anything. I'm trying to find out what happened to him. These are serious allegations that could damage your career and your family's legacy." Briggs stood. "I'm classifying this case for national security review. You're to stop your investigation immediately. All documents are to be returned to the classified vault." "Sir." "That's an order, Commander. You're being reassigned to a different project effective immediately. Personnel will have your new assignment by end of day." Sarah didn't move. "What are you afraid I'll find?" Briggs met her eyes. "I'm trying to protect you. Some things are better left buried." She left his office knowing she'd just made an enemy. As she walked back to her desk, her security credentials were already being flagged in the system. Someone very powerful wanted this investigation shut down, and they wanted it shut down now. That confirmed everything. Her great-grandfather had been murdered, and the conspiracy was still active. November 20th, 2024. Sarah's apartment, Arlington, Virginia. Sarah sat on her couch surrounded by papers she'd copied before Briggs shut her down. Technically, she was violating orders. Technically, she could be court-martialed. She didn't care. Her great-grandfather deserved the truth. She pulled up Station Hypo personnel records from 1943-1944. Thomas Chen had worked there as a cryptographer, one of the team that helped break Japanese naval codes. His final log entry mentioned sending backup copies of his decoded evidence to someone he trusted. She searched for communications officers assigned to Station Hypo during that period, found a list of 12 names. Most were dead. But one name caught her eye: James Callahan, communications officer aboard the USS Ceylon, operating in the same theater as the Grayback. Sarah ran his name through veteran databases. Still alive. Age 102. Living in a nursing home in San Diego. She booked a flight for tomorrow morning, using personal leave time. As she packed, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Some graves should stay closed, Commander, for your family's sake." Sarah stared at the message. Someone was watching her searches. Someone knew she was getting close. She turned off her phone and kept packing. November 22nd, 2024. Pacific Shores Veterans Home, La Jolla, California. The nursing home overlooked the ocean. Sarah could smell salt air as she walked through the entrance. The nurse at the desk was skeptical. "Captain Callahan doesn't usually accept visitors. His health is failing." "I've come a long way. It's about the war." The nurse studied Sarah's military ID, then softened. "He's in room 214. But please don't tire him out. The cancer is very advanced." Sarah found James Callahan in a wheelchair by the window, oxygen cannula in his nose, gazing out at the Pacific. He was impossibly thin, his Navy captain's ring loose on his skeletal finger. "Captain Callahan?" He turned slowly. His eyes were sunken but sharp. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen. I'm with Naval Intelligence. I'm investigating the loss of the USS Grayback." Callahan's eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. "Chen?" His voice was hoarse. "Your great-grandfather was Thomas Chen?" Sarah nodded, surprised. "You knew him?" Callahan's eyes filled with tears. "I've been waiting," he whispered. 80 years. I've been waiting for someone from his family to find me." Sarah pulled a chair closer. What happened to him? Why was the Grayback's position falsified? Callahan closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with guilt and relief. "Because I was a coward. I knew they were murdered, and I said nothing." He looked at Sarah. "I'm dying. Stage 4 lung cancer. I have maybe 2 months left. I've carried this secret long enough." He gestured to a recorder on the table beside him. "I need you to record everything I'm about to say. My testimony, my confession, my attempt at redemption after 8 decades of silence. Sarah's hands shook as she set up the recording. Tell me everything. Callahan's testimony took 3 hours. He told her about the night of March 1, 1944. He was communications officer aboard the USS Grayback, operating in the same sector as the Grayback. At 11:47 p.m., he intercepted an unusual encrypted radio transmission between Pearl Harbor and the Grayback, a message that wasn't in any code book he recognized. Hours later, he picked up frantic Japanese naval chatter. They had located an American submarine with suspicious precision. The next day, March 2, 1944, Callahan received emergency orders to maintain absolute radio silence. The Grayback was never heard from again. A week later, Callahan was abruptly transferred to a desk job in San Diego. 2 naval intelligence officers visited him and told him the radio intercepts he'd logged were classified. He was never to speak of them. When he tried to report what he'd heard, that the Japanese seemed to know exactly where to find the Grayback, he was told that discussing the matter would jeopardize ongoing operations, could be considered treason. One of those officers was Vincent Hartley. Callahan looked at Sarah with ancient guilt in his eyes. Your great-grandfather discovered that someone in naval intelligence was leaking submarine patrol routes to the Japanese. He identified the traitor. It was Hartley. Thomas compiled irrefutable evidence, decoded Japanese messages that contained information only available from U.S. intelligence briefings. Sarah felt sick. The transmission I intercepted on March 1st was your great-grandfather's final report to Pearl Harbor. He was identifying Hartley as the traitor. And Hartley found out. Hartley had him killed. Callahan's voice broke. The Grayback was hunted down and depth-charged until it sank. 80 men died because one man wanted to protect his secret. After the war, Hartley volunteered to help translate Japanese naval records. He personally falsified the coordinates for the Grayback and every other submarine he'd betrayed. Made sure they'd never be found. Sarah was crying now. Couldn't stop. Your great-grandfather wasn't just a victim. He was a hero who discovered treason at the highest levels and died trying to stop it. Callahan gripped her hand. He made backup copies of his decoded evidence, sent them to a trusted colleague at Station Haipyo for safekeeping. Those documents were supposed to be archived, but disappeared after the war, almost certainly destroyed by Hartley. He paused. But there might be one more copy. Your great-grandfather's personal work files from Station Haipyo were boxed up and sent to his widow after his death. If those papers still exist somewhere in your family, they would contain the original evidence. Callahan's breathing was labored now. Make sure the world knows what he did, and make sure Hartley pays. Sarah stayed with him for another hour. They talked about Thomas Chen, about the war, about the weight of secrets. 3 days later, James Callahan died peacefully in his sleep. His testimony was the last thing he recorded before he passed. November 26, 2024. Sarah's grandmother's house, San Francisco. Sarah's grandmother was 86 years old, still sharp, living alone in the house where she'd raised Sarah's father. Your great-great-grandmother kept everything, she said, leading Sarah to the basement. After Thomas died, she couldn't throw any of it away. The boxes had been moved to a storage facility in Oakland when the house was sold in 1990. Sarah's grandmother still paid the monthly fee. I haven't looked at them in decades, she admitted. It was too painful. Sarah drove to Oakland that night. The storage facility was in an industrial area near the waterfront. She found her family's unit on the 3rd floor and unlocked it with the key her grandmother had given her. The door swung open. The unit had been ransacked. Boxes overturned, papers scattered, filing cabinets forced open. Someone had gotten here first. Sarah's pulse hammered as she searched through the wreckage. Old family photos, letters, documents. But any official Navy papers were gone. Then she noticed a small metal case shoved behind a filing cabinet, overlooked, covered in dust. She opened it. Inside were Thomas Chen's personal notebooks from Station Hypo, filled with handwritten cryptographic notes and decoded intercepts. And tucked into the back of the last notebook was what she needed: her great-grandfather's original handwritten analysis, identifying Vincent Hartley as the traitor, complete with decoded Japanese messages showing American submarine coordinates and Hartley's access logs proving he was the source. Dated February 20th, 1944. One day before Chen reported his findings, Sarah photographed every page with her phone, uploaded them to an encrypted cloud server. As she was leaving the facility, two men in dark suits stepped out of a sedan blocking her car. They didn't identify themselves, didn't show badges. One simply said, "Admiral Hartley would like to speak with you, Commander Chen. He's very concerned about your investigation." It wasn't a request. Sarah realized she was in immediate danger. These men didn't work for the Navy. They were Hartley's private security, and they'd been ordered to silence her. She ran. November 26, 2024, Oakland, California, night. Sarah sprinted through the parking garage. Her footsteps echoed off concrete. Behind her, she heard the two men running, their dress shoes slapping the pavement. She reached the stairwell and threw herself down the stairs, taking them three at a time. A door slammed above her. They were following. Sarah burst out onto the street level and kept running. The neighborhood was industrial, mostly warehouses. Few people at this hour. She ducked into an alley, pressed herself against the wall, tried to control her breathing. The men ran past. She waited 30 seconds, then moved in the opposite direction. Found a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away, went inside, ordered coffee, tried to think. Her phone buzzed. Commander Briggs. She didn't answer. It buzzed again. Unknown number. She turned it off completely. Whatever happened next, she was on her own. November 27, 2024. Motel 6, Sacramento. Sarah paid cash for the room, gave a fake name. The clerk didn't care. She sat on the bed and took inventory. Callahan's video testimony on her phone, her great-grandfather's notebooks photographed and uploaded to cloud storage. Evidence of Hartley's treason, but not enough. Not enough to prosecute a decorated 96-year-old admiral without official corroboration. What she needed was the original translated Japanese war report, the one Hartley had falsified. If she could prove he deliberately mistranscribed the coordinates, she could establish a pattern of evidence tampering that would force the Navy to investigate everything else. Sarah opened her laptop and connected to the motel's Wi-Fi using a VPN. Her security credentials hadn't been fully revoked yet. Someone was playing a careful game, not wanting to alert her too obviously. She accessed the National Archives database remotely, searched for the original Japanese naval documents captured after the war, not the translations, the actual photographed or microfilmed Japanese text. The system was slow. Files from 1945 were buried in obscure classification categories. After 2 hours of searching, she found them. Original Japanese after-action reports from Pacific naval operations, stored as microfilm images in a rarely accessed section of the Pacific War records. She downloaded the images for March 1944, found the destroyer group that had operated in the East China Sea. There. Attack report dated March 2, 1944. A U.S. submarine engaged and destroyed. Sarah used online translation tools to decode the Japanese characters. Her hands were shaking. The coordinates were clear. 25 degrees, 47 minutes north, 128 degrees, 45 minutes. East, exactly where the Grayback had actually been found. Over 100 miles from where Hartley's official 1946 translation claimed. Sarah pulled up Hartley's translated report from the archives, compared them side by side. The original Japanese document said one thing. Hartley's translation said another. It wasn't a mistake. It was fraud. It was treason. She had proof. November 27, 2024. Evening. Sarah's email pinged. Commander Briggs. Commander Chen, your security clearances have been suspended pending an investigation into unauthorized access of classified materials. Report to JAG immediately. She was being set up. Hartley was using his connections to have her arrested before she could expose him. Sarah closed the laptop. She had maybe 24 hours before they found her, maybe less. She needed to force a confrontation, somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses. She pulled up news sites, searching for Hartley's schedule. Found it on the third try. Admiral Vincent Hartley was scheduled to deliver the keynote address at Arlington National Cemetery in 2 days. November 29th. A memorial service honoring World War II submarine veterans lost in the Pacific. Perfect. Public venue, media coverage, hundreds of witnesses. Sarah started driving east, November 28, 2024, somewhere in Nevada. Sarah drove through the night, stopped only for gas and coffee, paid cash, kept checking her rearview mirror. No one seemed to be following, but she couldn't be sure. She pulled into a rest stop at 3 a.m. and slept in her car for 2 hours, woke with her neck cramped and her mind racing. By dawn, she was driving again. Her phone, still turned off, sat in the passenger seat. She knew what would happen when she turned it back on. Messages from Briggs, warnings from JAG, maybe arrest warrants. But she also knew what she had to do. She stopped at a rest area in Utah and used the public Wi-Fi to send emails. 3 journalists she trusted. A Navy JAG officer who'd helped her on a previous investigation. The chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee. The subject line was identical for all of them. Evidence of treason in WWII Naval Intelligence. To be published if anything happens to me. She attached everything: Callahan's testimony, her great-grandfather's notebooks, the comparison of the original Japanese report and Hartley's falsified translation. Set the emails to send automatically if she didn't cancel them within 48 hours. Insurance. Then she got back on the road. November 29, 2024. Arlington National Cemetery. Morning. Sarah arrived at dawn. The memorial service wasn't until 10 a.m., but she needed to scout the location. Arlington was enormous, thousands of white headstones stretching across rolling hills. The amphitheater where the service would be held was near the tomb of the unknown soldier. She parked 3 blocks away and walked in, wearing civilian clothes, a baseball cap pulled low. The amphitheater was already being prepared. Chairs set up, sound system tested, security sweeping the area. Sarah spotted them immediately. Hartley's private security team. 3 men in dark suits scanning the growing crowd of early arrivals. They were looking for her. Sarah blended in with a group of elderly veterans and their families, kept her head down, found a seat in the middle section, surrounded by people, safe in the crowd. The amphitheater filled slowly. Veterans in uniform, families holding photos of lost sailors, media crews setting up cameras. By 9:45 a.m., there were at least 500 people present. At 9:50 a.m., Admiral Vincent Hartley arrived. Sarah had seen photos of Hartley, but seeing him in person was different. He was frail, but commanding. Wore his dress uniform with its rows of medals. Walked with a cane, but moved with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in power. He took his seat on the dais, surrounded by other military officials. Sarah watched him from 30 yards away. This man had murdered her great-grandfather, had murdered 80 men aboard the Grayback, had spent 80 years living as a hero while those men stayed silent at the bottom of the ocean, her hands clenched. The ceremony began at 10 a.m. A Navy chaplain offered a prayer. A general spoke about sacrifice. A military choir sang the Navy hymn. Then Admiral Hartley stood to deliver the keynote address. He moved slowly to the podium. The crowd quieted. "We gather today," he began, his voice surprisingly strong, "to honor the brave submariners who gave their lives in the Pacific, men who sailed into danger knowing they might never return. Sarah felt rage building in her chest. I think especially today of the USS Grayback, 80 souls lost in February 1944, a tragic loss that reminds us of the price of freedom. He paused for effect. These men died protecting our nation. Their sacrifice must never be forgotten. Sarah stood up. The people around her looked confused. They didn't die protecting our nation, she said loudly. They were murdered. The crowd went silent. Security moved toward her, but Sarah was already walking down the aisle toward the podium. They were hunted down because you gave the Japanese their coordinates. Hartley stared at her. His face was a mask of controlled fury. Sarah held up her phone. Evidence displayed. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Chen was my great-grandfather. He was aboard the Grayback because he'd identified you as a traitor. The media cameras swung toward her. You were selling submarine patrol routes to Japanese intelligence between 1942 and 1944. When my great-grandfather decoded the evidence, you had him killed. Security grabbed her arms, but she kept talking, voice ringing across the cemetery. The Grayback wasn't sunk on February 27, 1944. It was sunk on March 2nd. Your translation of the Japanese war records falsified the coordinates by 107 miles. She wrenched one arm free, held up her phone. I have the original Japanese documents. I have my great-grandfather's decoded evidence from his personal files. And I have testimony from Captain James Callahan, who intercepted your betrayal in real time. Hartley's expression shifted, calculating. He signaled security to release her. Smart. He couldn't have her arrested on camera without making things worse. He addressed her directly, voice cold. You're making wild accusations based on 80-year-old paperwork you don't understand, Commander. Your great-grandfather died a hero. Don't dishonor his memory with conspiracy theories. Sarah took a step closer. I have your signature on the falsified translation report. I have the decoded Japanese messages showing American tactical intelligence that only you had access to. And I have a recording of Captain Callahan's deathbed testimony explaining how you threatened him into silence for 8 decades. The crowd was watching, phones out, recording everything. Hartley realized he was trapped. His carefully constructed legacy was crumbling in real time. You murdered 80 men on the Grayback, Sarah said. You murdered hundreds more on other submarines. You spent 80 years living as a hero on top of their graves. And you deliberately hid their wrecks so no one would ever know the truth. For a long moment, Hartley said nothing. Then something broke in his face, a flash of rage, of desperation. You don't understand, he hissed. It was war. Intelligence is about sacrifices. Those men died so we could get intelligence that saved thousands more. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Chen didn't understand that. He was going to destroy everything over some trivial... He stopped. Realized what he'd just admitted. The cameras had caught it all. November 29, 2024. Afternoon. Within an hour, the video was everywhere. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, social media platforms, international news agencies, Admiral Vincent Hartley's partial confession at Arlington National Cemetery, confronted by the great-granddaughter of one of his victims. Sarah sat in a conference room at the Pentagon with 3 Navy JAG officers and a representative from the Department of Justice. Her automatic emails had been canceled. No need for them now. Commander Chen, the JAG officer said, we need your full cooperation for the investigation. You have it. We're placing Admiral Hartley under house arrest pending formal charges. We're also examining all submarine losses between 1942 and 1944 for similar patterns. The DOJ representative leaned forward. Your evidence is compelling. The original Japanese documents, your great-grandfather's notebooks, Captain Callahan's testimony, combined with Hartley's statement at the cemetery. We have enough for treason charges. Sarah felt something release in her chest. Relief, grief, vindication. There's one more thing, the JAG officer said. We've discovered that Hartley falsified the translations for 3. Other submarines during the same period: the USS Wahoo, the USS Scorpion, the USS Harder. All submarines he betrayed? We believe so. Forensic archivists are examining the records now. The evidence was overwhelming. Vincent Hartley's decorated legacy was destroyed. December 2nd, 2024. McLean, Virginia. Admiral Vincent Hartley died of a heart attack at his estate, 3 days after being formally charged with treason, espionage, and conspiracy to commit murder. He was 96 years old. Some said it was the stress. Others whispered it might have been suicide. Either way, Vincent Hartley would never stand trial. But his legacy was in ruins. The Navy retroactively revoked his medals, removed his name from the building that had honored him, issued a formal apology to the families of the submarines he betrayed. His obituary in the Navy Times was a single paragraph noting his death and the criminal charges he faced. No honors, no memorial service, no burial at Arlington, just silence. December 15th, 2024. Sarah's apartment, Arlington. Sarah sat on her couch watching the news coverage. Congressional hearings had been announced. The Navy was conducting a full review of all World War II submarine losses. Families were being contacted. Her phone rang. Her grandmother. "Sarah, I just got a call from the Navy. They're planning a memorial service for Thomas, a proper one, at Arlington." Sarah closed her eyes. "When?" "Next month, January 15th. They're awarding him the Navy Distinguished Service Medal posthumously." "He deserves it." Her grandmother's voice cracked. "I never thought I'd live to see this, to know what really happened to him." They talked for another hour about Thomas Chen, about the family, about justice finally served after 8 decades. After they hung up, Sarah opened her laptop. She had a new assignment from the Chief of Naval Operations. A thick folder marked cold cases, potential cover-ups, 1941-1953. Admiral Richardson had personally requested her for the job. "Captain Chen," his note read, "your work on the Grayback case was extraordinary. We have reason to believe there are other incidents from WWII and the early Cold War where the official story doesn't match the evidence, incidents that were deliberately buried. We'd like you to investigate." Sarah opened the folder. Inside were files on submarine losses, intelligence operations gone wrong, classified missions with suspicious outcomes. Each one represented sailors, soldiers, or intelligence officers whose deaths might not have been what the official records claimed. Each one represented families who deserved the truth. She thought of her great-grandfather, of James Callahan, of the 80 men who went down with the Grayback. She thought of all the other stories still buried, waiting for someone to bring them to light. She would find them. She would tell their stories. She would make sure the truth, no matter how long buried, finally came. Home. January 15th, 2025. Arlington National Cemetery. 6 months had passed since Sarah confronted Hartley at the November memorial service. 6 months of investigations, congressional hearings, and media coverage. 6 months of watching the Navy slowly acknowledge what had been buried for 8 decades. Today was different. Today was about honor. Sarah stood beside her grandmother in the cold January air. The amphitheater was filled again, but this time the ceremony was for the crew of the USS Grayback. 80 names, 80 sailors who'd been listed as routine combat casualties for 75 years, now recognized as victims of treason. Sarah's father stood on her other side, holding a photograph of Thomas Chen in his Navy uniform. He'd driven down from Philadelphia with Sarah's sister and her children. 4 generations of the Chen family, finally learning the truth about their patriarch. Admiral Richardson, Chief of Naval Operations, stood at the podium. "We gather today," he began, "not just to honor the dead, but to correct a grave injustice. For 80 years, the men of the USS Grayback were remembered as casualties of war. That was a lie." He paused, letting the words settle. "These men were murdered by one of our own, betrayed by an officer who valued his ambition more than their lives, and then buried, literally and figuratively, to hide that betrayal. Sarah felt her grandmother's hand tighten on her arm. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Chen was aboard the Grayback because he had discovered evidence of treason. He was transporting decoded intelligence that would have exposed Captain Vincent Hartley as a spy working for Japanese naval intelligence. Richardson's voice grew stronger. Chen knew the risks. He knew Hartley would try to stop him. His final log entry, written as Japanese destroyers closed in on his submarine, stated simply, "They found us. The coordinates were leaked. This is not an accident." Sarah closed her eyes, could almost hear her great-grandfather's voice. Thomas Chen and the 79 sailors who died with him were not random casualties of war. They were targeted, hunted, murdered, and then erased from history through falsified records. Richardson looked directly at Sarah and her family. "Today, we set the record straight." The ceremony continued with military precision. A Navy honor guard presented the flag to Sarah's grandmother. She accepted it with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "On behalf of a grateful nation," the officer said, "and the United States Navy, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for Lieutenant Commander Chen's honorable and faithful service." Sarah's grandmother pressed the flag to her chest. Then Admiral Richardson called Sarah forward. "Captain Chen," he said, she'd been promoted to captain 2 weeks ago, "your great-grandfather was awarded the Navy Cross in 1943 for his cryptographic work at Station Hypo. Today, we're awarding him the Navy Distinguished Service Medal posthumously for his actions in 1944. He held up the medal. "For exceptionally meritorious service to the government of the United States in a duty of great responsibility. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Chen discovered evidence of espionage that threatened American submarine operations in the Pacific Theater. Despite knowing the extreme personal danger, he accepted a classified mission to transport this evidence to Pearl Harbor for official investigation. His courage and dedication to duty resulted in the ultimate sacrifice. His actions exemplify the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service." Sarah accepted the medal. The weight of it felt significant in her hand. Then Richardson continued, "But this ceremony isn't just about Thomas Chen, it's about all 80 men who died aboard the Grayback." He gestured to a large memorial stone being unveiled behind him. Carved into black granite were 80 names, the complete crew manifest of the USS Grayback. Below the names, an inscription, "Lost March 2nd, 1944. Murdered by betrayal, honored in truth." "This memorial will stand as a reminder," Richardson said, "that we owe our fallen not just remembrance, but honesty. No matter how long it takes, no matter how powerful the conspiracy, the truth matters." After the ceremony, families gathered around the memorial stone. Sarah watched an elderly woman, someone's grandmother, touch one of the names with arthritic fingers, saw a middle-aged man, probably someone's son, place flowers at the base. 80 names, 80 families, 80 stories that had been lies for 80 years. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your great-grandfather would be proud. A friend." Sarah stared at the message, wondered who'd sent it. Then she noticed an old man in a Navy captain's uniform standing at the edge of the crowd. He was watching her with knowing eyes. He nodded once, then turned and walked away. Sarah thought about Callahan, about all the people who'd carried secrets for decades, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. How many more were out there, still waiting? January 15th, 2025. Evening. The family dinner was at Sarah's grandmother's house in San Francisco. They'd flown back after the ceremony. Sarah's father raised his glass. To Thomas Chen, finally recognized for what he really was, a hero. They drank. Sarah's grandmother set down her wine glass and looked at Sarah. "What happens now with the investigation?" "The Navy's still reviewing records. They've identified 3 other submarines Hartley betrayed: the Wahoo, the Scorpion, and the Harder. Families are being contacted. And the people who helped him cover it up? Sarah hesitated. Some are dead, others are being investigated. Commander Briggs was quietly reassigned. There are questions about who else knew. Her sister spoke up. The news said there might be more cases like this, other cover-ups. There are. Sarah pulled out her phone, showed them the cold case folder. I've been assigned to investigate historical incidents where the official story doesn't match the evidence. Her grandmother studied the file list. This will consume your life, Sarah, chasing ghosts, digging up secrets people have killed to protect. I know. Your great-grandfather died doing this. I know that too. Her grandmother reached across the table, took Sarah's hand. Then, do it right. Make them all count. Every name, every story, every family that deserves the truth. Sarah nodded. I will. January 20th, 2025. Naval Criminal Investigative Service, Washington, D.C. Sarah's new office was larger than her old one. Windows overlooking the Potomac, a secure computer terminal, filing cabinets waiting to be filled, Captain Sarah Chen, lead investigator, Historical War Crimes Division. The division had been reactivated specifically for her. Admiral Richardson had made it clear she had full authority to investigate any case she deemed credible, full access to classified records, full support from the JAG office. No more commanders shutting her down, no more secrets buried for convenience. Her first case file sat on her desk. USS Wahoo, lost October 1943. Official cause, sunk by Japanese depth charges during routine patrol. Actual cause, unknown. But the Wahoo had been in the same intelligence network as the Grayback, and Hartley had personally translated the Japanese records for this loss, too. Sarah opened the file and began reading. The Wahoo had carried a crew of 80, had disappeared without a trace. The wreck had never been found. Family members had spent 70 years wondering what happened. Sarah made notes, started a list of people to interview, documents to request. Her phone rang, unknown number. She answered. Captain Chen, a woman's voice. Elderly, careful. Yes? My name is Margaret Sullivan. My father was aboard the USS Scorpion when it disappeared in 1944. I saw the news about what you did for the Grayback families. Sarah grabbed a pen. I'm listening, Mrs. Sullivan. My father wrote letters home every week. The last one I received was dated January 3rd, 1944. But the Navy said his submarine sank on January 5th. That's only a 2-day discrepancy. Yes? But in that letter, my father mentioned being assigned to transport classified materials to Pearl Harbor. Something about decoded intelligence. Does that sound familiar? Sarah's pulse quickened. Very familiar. Did he mention what kind of intelligence? No, but he said it was important, said it could change the war, and then he was dead 2 days later. Sarah pulled up the Scorpion file on her computer. Sunk January 5th, 1944. Official cause, Japanese depth charges. Coordinates provided by translated Japanese war records. Translated by Captain Vincent Hartley. Mrs. Sullivan, I need you to send me everything you have. Letters, documents, photographs, anything your father sent home. You think the same thing happened to him? I think it's possible, and I'm going to find out. After they hung up, Sarah stared at the Scorpion file. If Hartley had betrayed the Scorpion too, that made 4 submarines. 320 men. How many more? January 25th, 2025. National Archives. Sarah spent 12 hours a day in the archives now, pulling files, cross-referencing documents, building timelines. She'd identified a pattern. Between November 1942 and March 1944, 7 American submarines had been lost in the Pacific under circumstances that didn't quite make sense. All 7 had been carrying intelligence officers or classified materials. All 7 had been attacked by Japanese forces that seemed to know exactly where to find them, and all 7 had their loss reports translated by Vincent Hartley after the war. Sarah pulled the Japanese war records for each incident, the ones Hartley had translated. Then she requested the original Japanese documents, the microfilm images that Hartley had worked from. It took 3 days to get approval, another week to locate the files. But when they arrived, Sarah saw what she'd expected. Every single translation had been falsified, coordinates changed, dates altered, details omitted. Hartley hadn't just betrayed the Grayback, he'd betrayed 7 submarines, over 500 men, and spent 40 years making sure no one would ever know. February 10, 2025, Senate Armed Services Committee hearing. Sarah testified for 6 hours, presented her findings, showed the evidence, named the submarines she believed had been betrayed. The committee members listened in stunned silence. Senator Morrison, no relation to the Hartley case, spoke first. "Captain Chen, you're alleging that one man was responsible for the loss of 7 submarines and over 500 sailors?" "Yes, Senator." "And that this betrayal was covered up for 80 years?" "Yes, Senator." "How is that possible?" Sarah pulled up a document on the screen behind her. After the war, Captain Hartley was assigned to the Pacific Records Translation Unit. He personally supervised the translation of all Japanese naval documents related to American submarine losses. He had complete access, no oversight, and the credibility that came from being a decorated intelligence officer. She advanced to the next slide. He systematically falsified the coordinates for every submarine he'd betrayed, changed dates, altered tactical details, made it look like random combat losses instead of targeted attacks. And no one noticed? Why would they? The war was over. We'd won. The Navy was focused on demobilization, not investigating old losses. Hartley's translations became the official record. Senator Chen, also no relation, leaned forward. "What about the families? Didn't they ask questions?" "Some did, but they were told the same thing I was told. Mistakes happen in wartime record-keeping. Translation errors are common. Let the dead rest in peace." Sarah's voice hardened. "Hartley used our respect for the fallen as a shield, made it seem disrespectful to question the official story, and by the time I discovered the truth, he'd spent 75 years building a reputation as one of the Navy's greatest intelligence officers." The hearing room was silent. Finally, the committee chair spoke. "Captain Chen, what do you recommend?" "Full investigation of all submarine losses between 1941 and 1945. Review of all translations Hartley supervised. Forensic analysis of Japanese war records, and notification of all families involved." "That could take years." "Justice usually does, Senator." February 15, 2025. Sarah's apartment. Sarah came home after midnight to find a package on her doorstep. No return address, no postage marks. She brought it inside carefully, opened it with latex gloves. Inside was a folder marked "Eyes Only" and a note. "Captain Chen, you've found Hartley's World War II crimes, but you haven't found everything. Some of us worked with him during the Cold War. Some of us knew what he'd done and stayed silent because he was useful. Some of us helped him bury new secrets." This folder contains evidence of Operation Deepwater, a Cold War intelligence program that used Hartley's methods, submarine accidents that weren't accidents, intelligence officers who died but were actually assassinated. "I'm old now, dying, cancer. Like Callahan, I've carried this too long. The truth matters more than my reputation. Find them, tell their stories." A friend. Sarah opened the folder. Inside were documents from the 1960s and 1970s, classified intelligence reports, accident investigations, personnel files, and a list of names. Sailors who died under suspicious circumstances, intelligence officers who disappeared, submarine incidents that had never been fully explained. Sarah read through the night. By dawn, she'd identified 12 cases worth investigating, 12 more families who deserve the truth. March 1st, 2025. Arlington National Cemetery. Sarah visited the Grayback Memorial on the 81st anniversary of the sinking. The stone was covered in flowers now, photos of the crew members, letters from families. She knelt and placed her hand on her great-grandfather's name. "I found them," she whispered. "All the others Hartley betrayed. I'm going to tell their stories, too." The wind moved through the trees. Sarah stood and looked out across Arlington, thousands of white headstones, thousands of stories, some true, some lies, all waiting to be discovered. Her phone buzzed. Admiral Richardson. "Captain Chen, I just received your report on Operation Deepwater. Is this credible?" "Yes, sir, I believe it is." "Then we have more work to do." "Yes, sir, we do." She hung up and walked back to her car. The cold case folder was on the passenger seat, growing thicker every week as new leads emerged. Sarah drove back to her office. She had 12 investigations to start, 12 families to contact, 12 truths to uncover. The work would never be finished. There would always be more secrets, more cover-ups, more families who deserved answers. But that was the job. That was what her great-grandfather had died for. The truth. No matter how long buried, no matter how powerful the conspiracy, the truth always mattered. March 15th, 2025. Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Sarah's office was full now. Filing cabinets labeled with submarine names: USS Wahoo, USS Scorpion, USS Harder, USS Tang, USS Shark. Each one a story, each one a family. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Captain Chen, there's someone here to see you. She says her grandfather was aboard the USS Wahoo." Sarah looked up from her work. "Send her in." A woman in her 70s entered. She was holding a manila envelope and a photograph. "Captain Chen, my name is Patricia Moore. My grandfather was Commander Robert Moore, executive officer on the Wahoo when it disappeared in 1943. Sarah stood and shook her hand. "Please sit down. Tell me about your grandfather." Patricia opened the envelope. "He kept a journal. My grandmother saved it after he died. I've read it 100 times over the years, and there's always been something that bothered me." She pulled out a weathered notebook. His last entry was dated October 10th, 1943, the day before the Wahoo was supposed to have sailed on its final patrol. Patricia opened to the marked page. He wrote, "We've been assigned to transport classified materials to Pearl Harbor. The cargo officer seemed nervous, said the material was explosive, not literally, but politically. Something about decoded Japanese intelligence that identified a mole in our own command. I don't like this mission. Something feels wrong." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "Did he mention any names?" "No, but he wrote this." Patricia pointed to the bottom of the page. "If something happens to us, someone needs to know. We weren't on a combat patrol. We were carrying evidence that could destroy careers, make someone ask questions." Sarah took the notebook carefully. "Mrs. Moore, I need to make copies of this. It could be crucial evidence." "Evidence of what?" Sarah looked at the photograph on her desk. Thomas Chen in his Navy uniform. "Evidence that your grandfather and mine died for the same reason. They both discovered the truth, and someone made sure they'd never tell anyone." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "All these years I thought he just died in combat, that it was random, bad luck. It wasn't random, it was murder, and I'm going to prove it." November 11th, 2025. Veterans Day. The memorial service at Arlington honored 4 more submarines: the Wahoo, the Scorpion, the Harder, and the Tang. Sarah stood with 12 families this time, 12 families, who'd finally learned the truth about their lost sailors. Admiral Richardson spoke again. "Earlier this year, we honored the crew of the USS Grayback and acknowledged a betrayal that had been hidden for 8 decades. Today, we honor 4 more crews, 256 more sailors who died because of treason." The memorial wall had been expanded, 336 names now carved in black granite. all victims of Vincent Hartley's betrayal. Thanks to Captain Chen's investigation, Richardson continued, we now know the full extent of Hartley's crimes. 7 submarines, 536 American sailors, betrayed, murdered, and buried beneath lies. He paused. But we also know something else. We know that truth, no matter how long buried, can still be found. Justice, no matter how delayed, can still be served. Sarah thought about her great-grandfather, about Callahan, about all the people who'd kept silent for decades, carrying the weight of secrets, about the families who'd waited a lifetime for answers. Richardson looked directly at her. Captain Chen has opened 8 more investigations, 8 more submarines with suspicious circumstances, 8 more sets of families who deserve the truth. Sarah nodded. The work continued. It always would. That evening, Sarah returned to her office. A new file waited on her desk. USS Swordfish, lost January 1945. She opened it and began to read. The official story was simple: lost in combat, no survivors. But buried in the file was a radio intercept from a nearby submarine. Swordfish reports contact with unknown American vessel, investigating suspicious activity, will report findings. No further transmissions were received. Sarah made a note, started a timeline, began building the case. Somewhere, a family was waiting. Somewhere, a sailor's story had been buried beneath lies. And Sarah would find it, because the truth always mattered, no matter how long it took, no matter who had tried to bury it. The ghosts of the past deserved to be heard, and Sarah Chen would make sure they were.